Hey, what's up? It's GC Kinsey, here to talk about J.K. Rowling. It had to happen sometime, right? On International Asexuality Day 2025, famed British author and notorious transphobe J.K. Rowling tweeted this, then continued to show further ignorance and bigotry around the topic of asexuality in her replies to comments on that tweet. And as much as I've avoided adding my voice to the conversation about J.K. Rowling and giving her even more attention than she deserves, I unfortunately feel the need to talk about this for a very specific reason. This isn't the first time I've seen transphobia and aphobia go hand in hand. Far from it. And as someone who's both asexual and transgender, and who lives in the United States where my rights as a queer person are actively being eroded every day, I would be remiss if I didn't call attention to this particular pattern of bigotry. And where I want to start is with the assumption JK makes here, which is framing asexuality as fake oppression, because that reflects a long-running discourse about whether or not asexuals count as queer. A lot of the arguments in that discourse go something like, aces don't experience discrimination and hate like real queer people do. They're not actually oppressed, they just want to be in the cool rainbow people club. They're playing the victim so hard, which first of all is simply not true, and we have more data to back that up now than ever thanks to the work of Yasmin Benoit in partnership with Stonewall UK. But even if it were true and aces didn't face oppression, are we really defining queerness by how oppressed we are? 'Cause that's just sad. The result of this discourse, though, is that a good bit of the bigotry aces face comes from within our own broader queer community. And when that brand of bigotry, that idea that aces aren't really oppressed and aren't really queer, gets spread outward and people who aren't queer see it, they think, oh, well, queer people are saying it, so it must be true, resulting in tweets like JK's that only fan the flames of that discourse by spreading it on an extremely global scale. I mean, we're talking about a celebrity who has, at the time I'm filming this, over 14 million Twitter followers, an estimated net worth of about 945 million pounds, or 1.2 billion US dollars, and an obscene amount of power and influence. We've already seen exactly how much damage that kind of power and influence can do when it's aimed at a small, vulnerable minority community, because that's exactly what's happened to the trans community, particularly in the UK where J.K. Rowling lives. The history of her transphobia is too long to get into here. It's not really the point of this video. It's been covered extensively elsewhere, and I've linked about that in the description if you want to learn more. But the latest, and in my opinion greatest way that she's done harm to the trans community is by using her wealth to influence political policy. In 2024, she donated £70,000 or 88,000 US dollars to an anti-trans group called For Women Scotland, which was created to challenge changes to Scotland's Gender Recognition Act. In 2025, she created the J.K. Rowling Women's Fund, which she uses to put her money behind court cases that center around what she calls sex-based rights. Also in 2025, not long after JK started pumping all of this personal money behind her transphobic cause, the UK Supreme Court heard a case brought forth by, guess who, For Women Scotland, and ruled that the legal definitions of man and woman under the Equality Act are based on a person's biological sex as assigned at birth. Side note, if you care about trans people at all, do not give J.K. Rowling your money. Trust me, I know firsthand how it feels to have grown up on Harry Potter and now have to be dealing with this betrayal by the author, but please, don't buy the books, don't buy the movies, don't buy tickets to The Cursed Child, don't buy the video game, don't watch the new HBO series when it comes out, don't buy any official Harry Potter merch at Universal Studios or anywhere else, because she's proven that she will use the money you give her to hurt trans people. The wording of that UK Supreme Court ruling is eerily similar to the wording of this executive order issued on January 20th, 2025, which states that here in the US, sex shall refer to an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. In both cases, the intent is clear: to establish a cisgender, binary-centric framework of gender as the only legal framework of gender, and to officially declare that trans, non-binary, and intersex people have no legal right to exist as themselves. themselves. Of course, there's no law or executive order or court ruling anywhere that can make us stop existing, but these transphobic government officials are certainly going to keep trying. And what really worries me about J.K. Rowling expressing so much hatred for trans people only to turn that hatred on ace people next is that those in power might follow suit. Here in the US, the biggest warning sign I've seen about that is the prioritization of the traditional nuclear family unit with 2 cisgender heterosexual parents and their children over everyone else. Not just queer people, but also cis-het people who are child-free and or single. Our vice president has said that his past comments about how parents should get more votes to account for their children, or how the country shouldn't be run by childless cat ladies, were just a thought experiment and not policy proposal. But that kind of rhetoric is baked into Project 2025, which the Republican Party seems to be trying their hardest to carry out, so I don't know what they might do, but I think it goes without saying how putting the traditional nuclear family with kids above everyone else would disproportionately impact asexual people, and by extension, aromantic people, really anyone aspec who's less likely to fit that married with kids paradigm. No matter where Republicans might fall on the ace discourse, whether they think we count as queer or not, it wouldn't go well for us. If they do think we're queer, they'll attack us and try to erase us the same way they're already doing with the trans community, and now most recently with the bisexual community, and probably with the gay community eventually down the road. And if they don't think we're queer, they'll just classify us as mentally ill. And we've seen what our Secretary of Health and Human Services thinks about mentally ill and neurodivergent people. It's giving eugenics. Like I said in the beginning, J.K. Rowling is not the first person I've seen go from spouting transphobic to aphobic talking points. That's something I've been encountering on social media for years now. Whenever you dig deeper into someone who's expressing aphobia, you'll often find a history of transphobia too. Scratch an aphobe, find a transphobe if you will. I've called this phenomenon the transphobe to aphobe pipeline for the purpose of this video, but I've seen it happen the other way around too. Scratch a transphobe, find an aphobe. But whatever comes first for someone, the transphobia or the aphobia, they seem to go hand in hand most of the time. But why? What is it that causes this particular overlap that makes people hate both of these groups? One group is based on orientation, while the other group is based on gender. And while it's possible to be both trans and ace like I am, that's not how all of us are. Not all trans people are ace, not all ace people are trans. There's no direct connection or correlation between our identities. So what is it that we have so in common for our haters? For some, I think it's just general queer phobia. If you hate queer people, then of course that's going to include trans people and aspec people by default. But what about those who aren't just generally queerphobic? Let's say they don't have a problem with gay or bi people, just with trans and aspec people. In that case, I suspect this dual trans-aphobia stems from some common misconceptions that a lot of people have about both of our communities. Trans people and aspec people aren't really oppressed, we just want to be victims. Trans people and aspec people give the rest of the queer community a bad name, make other queer people look ridiculous, make the rest of the world take queer people less seriously. Trans people and aspec people are going against biology or against the natural order of things. Yay, bioessentialism. Trans people and aspec people are destroying the existence of gays and lesbians, or at the very least, ruining their dating pool. Wait till they find out you can be trans and ace and gay. Also, people with other orientations exist, like bi and pan folks, for example, and they're always getting erased from this conversation. And because of all these other factors, trans people and aspec people are making homophobia worse. Our mere existence is homophobic by nature. When someone is both transphobic and aphobic, and it's not because of general queer phobia, it's because of one of those other factors, there's a chance that person is queer themselves. And that is the absolute worst when the call is coming from inside the house. We've seen that play out in the ace discourse I've talked about previously. We've seen it play out in similar discourse that tries to separate the trans community from the rest of the broader queer community in the form of things like the LGB Alliance or LGB without the T. And that kind of transphobic gatekeeping from queer spaces has been around for a long time.
I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I I've lost my apartment for gay liberation, and you all treat me this way?
If you remember your history, if you understand intersectionality, if you can see the patterns of keeping marginalized people oppressed by keeping us infighting amongst each other, then you'll know that there is no LGB without the T or the A or any other segment of this community, and there never has been. You'll know that the path to liberation needs all of us banded together. After all, each segment of the queer community has so much more in common with each other than we do different, especially when it comes to how we're viewed and treated from outside the community. Trans people and aspec people in particular have some significant overlap in how we experience bigotry and oppression. A lot of the discrimination we face happens in healthcare. Both trans and aspec people are more likely to be pathologized, infantilized within the medical system, offered cures or treatments, aka conversion therapy, just for existing as ourselves, and gate-kept from the treatments we actually do need while we're being railroaded into the ones we don't. Along similar lines, both of our communities not only tend to get framed as mentally ill, but have actually been classified as such in the DSM until very recently. That not only increases stigma and misconceptions about us, but also means that it might be more difficult for us to access the healthcare we need if we actually are mentally ill or neurodivergent. There's a misconception that if you cure us of our mental illness or neurodivergence, then that will also fix our transness or asexuality and allow us to live as normal people in society, which of course also contributes to how likely we are to be offered conversion therapy to help fix our minds. People think both of our communities upset the natural order of biology and procreation in even more extreme ways than cisgender LGB people do, because while cishet folks can sometimes compare LGB experiences and relationships to their own, they tend to struggle a lot more to relate to trans or aspec experiences. It's like the mere existence of someone who feels gender incongruence or doesn't feel sexual or romantic attraction breaks their brains. It defies everything they thought they knew about sex and sexuality. Both the trans and aspec communities are more likely to be left out of legal protections for other groups of queer people. We've seen this in conversion therapy bans that explicitly mention same-gender attraction but don't mention gender identity or a lack of attraction altogether. Same thing for anti-discrimination laws that cover LGB people but not trans or aspec or other kinds of queer people. And finally, both the trans and aspec communities have been facing what I like to call the visibility problem, where you're largely invisible, and then you suddenly gain a lot of visibility, and then you face pushback in response, because that increase in visibility doesn't come with adequate education, so then you're left with people making ignorant assumptions and spreading misconceptions about you. Trans people are further along the curve of this visibility problem than aspec people right now. Trans people are firmly in the backlash phase, while aspec people are still mostly in the that can't be real phase. But that feels like it's starting to change for the worse. Having someone as famous as J.K. Rowling mention the ace community in such a hateful and dismissive way is proof of that. I want to wrap this up by talking about how you can spot this overlap in transphobia and aphobia. How you can tell that someone is going down the transphobe to aphobe pipeline or vice versa. One of the biggest warning signs I see is when people express that they are vehemently opposed to the word queer. And yes, queer is a very loaded term with a complicated history. It has been used as a slur and it's hurt a lot of people. It's also been reclaimed, used both within our community and outside of it as an academic term to describe us, tied us to political organizing and activism. And the beauty of queer, as opposed to an acronym like LGBTQ+ and all of its variations, is that you can kick letters out of an acronym, but you can't kick anyone out of the word queer. And when I see someone being very loud about how queer is a slur and no one should be using it ever, especially when that person falls under the rainbow umbrella themselves, that often ends up being code for I want us to use an acronym so that we can kick certain letters out. And those letters always end up being the TQ+. We're lucky if we even get the A, even if it's just to exclude us. Another warning sign I see is how people approach feminism. Are they intersectional about it, or are they exclusionary? I pay especially close attention to how they feel about sex workers and where they place sex workers in their overall feminist views. If their attitude is everyone deserves liberation except for those gross sex workers who deserve nothing, then guess what? They're probably more likely to approach queer liberation in the same way. To say that everyone deserves it except for those weird trans and aspec freaks. Another warning sign is ableism, especially when it takes the shape of infantilization. Trans and aspec people are so frequently infantilized that as soon as I see someone expressing that attitude toward disabled people, I'm like, I wonder if this person also thinks that trans and aspec folks don't really know what's best for us and deserve to be treated like babies. Not to mention disabled folks, trans folks, and aspec folks all tend to get overly medicalized and treated unfairly by the healthcare system. So ableism as a form of systemic oppression has a lot in common with medical transphobia and aphobia. And the final warning sign I want to give is racism, which honestly I feel like ties back to every other system of oppression. When someone expresses racist views, I am never surprised when they also express transphobic and or aphobic views. Bigotry is bigotry at the end of the day, and racism is one of the longest running forms of bigotry in human history. So the more racist someone is, the more likely they are to be bigoted against other marginalized groups too, including trans and aspec people. I think right now, definitely in the US, but also in other parts of the world, it's really important that we recognize patterns of bigotry and hate, like this overlap between transphobia and aphobia. That we know what warning signs to look out for, that we call it out when we see it, and that we put in the work to stop it in its tracks. Because it's not going to stop with marginalized groups like trans folks and aspec folks who are more on the fringes, it's going to keep spreading. So if you're seeing tweets like J.K. Rowling's and thinking, first they came for the trans people, and I did not speak out because I was not trans. Then they came for the asexuals, and I did not speak out because I was not ace. Well, you better start speaking out because they're coming for you next. Take it from someone who's trans and ace and is speaking out. Don't say I didn't warn you. And on that delightful note, now is where I want to turn the conversation over to you. If you're trans or aspec or both, have you noticed this connection between transphobia and aphobia? Have you seen one lead to the other like it has for J.K. Rowling? What do you make of that overlap, and what kinds of warning signs have you seen that someone is likely to be both transphobic and aphobic? And whether you're directly affected by it or not, what questions do you have about all this? Drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. You can also reach out to me on other social media. I'm GC Kinsey across all platforms. And while you're here, feel free to check out more of my videos. I've got more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person. I've got cosplay music videos, cosplay tutorials, a whole bunch of cool resources for singers about voice changes on testosterone right here on this channel. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all of your support. I hope this gave you something to think about, and I will see you on the next one.